thank you for joining us. I'm David and I'm Advanced HE's Director of Inclusion. I'm really pleased to be joined by Kirsten and Ruth. And I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Kirsten, can I come to you, please?
Hello, thank you, David. My name is Kirsten MacLeod. I'm an Associate Professor at Edinburgh Napier, where I lead on the programme leader for the BA Television programme. And yes, I work with students across both film and television.
Thank you. Ruth.
Yeah, and I'm Ruth Cochran, and I'm now the academic lead for the Innovation School for the Glasgow School of Art's Highlands and Islands campus. But previously was at Edinburgh Napier University working alongside Kirsten in the School of Arts and Creative Industries.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased to have you both here today. Congratulations on your 2021 award from Times Higher for the outstanding contribution to equality, diversity and inclusion. I'm particularly impressed with the project and the judges were really kind of interested in the work that you've undertaken. One of the things that the judges really noticed was the ambition of the project to tackle something that isn't commonly talked about in higher education. Do you mind talking about the inspiration for the project and where it came from?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the part of the inspiration for the project really was in Scotland. The MSP Monica Lennon had been running a campaign for several years to provide free access for period products in Scotland. And by the time in 2018, when myself and Lindsey and Ruth had begun to think about how could we maybe do a project that brings our students together, the Scottish Government had initiated a pilot and were actually rolling out this initiative across schools and colleges and universities. We were really interested in it and could kind of see the potentially for it to kind of mobilise students, for it to be something that was operating on both a local and a global level, and that we could combine their learning. And I mean, as Ruth might say as well, the way in which the students jumped on it actually in terms of their enthusiasm and the way that they then ran with it was inspiring as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of follow on from that, our amazing colleague Lindsey Morgan, who's not with us today, but came to Kirsten and I with one of those ideas where we kind of just looked at each other and thought, this is so blindingly obvious that we should do something about it, that we can't believe we hadn't thought of it before. And when Lindsey talked about, you know, some of the period poverty and period dignity headlines that were coming to the fore at the time, it really struck me that I couldn't quite believe that I hadn't had a project proposal from a student on this topic before, having taught in the design departments for the previous kind of over 10 years, where students continually take on social challenges and look for design projects that impact their lives. It struck me that we hadn't had a single proposal in this area before, and that made me realise that there was a real need to do some work in the area of menstruation. And my initial reaction was, are we really going to spend the next several years, I thought several months, but it's turned out to be several years of our lives talking about periods? And I was struck with my own reaction at the dismay of that, which made me realise that I didn't know why I felt like that, and I wanted to find out. And I think that it's really important that we think about the shame that surrounds this subject, and that it has such a massive impact on so many people's lives. So I think that just immediately was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. We have to do this. And I think all the students and everybody, in fact, that we engaged from that point on seemed to have the same sort of reaction.
Thank you. I mean, that was certainly one of the responses from the judges, was that we need to be talking more about period poverty and menstruation. And this is a really good way to do that. I'm really interested to understand the engagement that you had across the organization, the interaction from students. So what did this look like from your perspective at Napier, and who was involved?
I mean, I'll maybe start with that,
Yeah.
Kirsten, if that makes sense, but because we didn't know, and that's how I always like to start a project, is not knowing where it's going to go. And from a design point of view, we're super used to that, and some other bits of the organisation are less used to it. But basically we knew this money was coming to the organisation to buy period products. And at the first instance, we had to find out who was going to be in control of that. And it turns out that most schools, colleges and universities have got a facilities department with quite traditional people in those departments who were getting checks and working out how they were going to buy tampons and pads with them and what they were going to do with those items. And that there is a design innovation project for me right from the start. And the idea of being able to get some students to think about, okay, where are these products going to go? How are we going to dispense them? How are we going to let people know where they are? How are we going to understand if what we're doing with this money is working? And to be able to fold in some really amazing storytelling into that project was just seemed like a really great kind of form for it. So we pulled together a few designers, and Kirsten can talk a little bit more about the storytelling and the communication part of it, because it turned out that was actually a massive element to what we decided to do in the end.
Yes, no, indeed. I mean, we had the design team who got on with their work in relation to designing the dispensers, and they were engaged. I mean, the whole project was very much about networking in a sense, and putting feelers out and building conversations. They were involved with various agencies and different clients such as Hey Girls. But the film and television team, there was a core team of 3 students who took on sort of principal roles. But beyond that, I mean, there were at least 15 students involved by the end with the actual filmmaking process, from researchers to editors to folk colouring and grading, doing sound. And then as well, we had journalism students, we had publishing students getting involved with a resource booklet that we've done. We've had business students helping with the marketing and the social media, and the students as well. And it features in the documentary. We ran a series of events, bloody big brunches, across all 3 campuses that Napier has, that involved hundreds of students and staff, and really brought the conversation to Napier. People were encouraged to donate products, but really more than that, it was about that sort of awareness raising. The students from the design team and the film and television students were involved in marketing these events, and they worked with event students. So it was a really good process, and the students really led on a lot of this. The idea was that it wasn't Ruth and Lindsey and myself, doing it all and telling them what to do. We really wanted the initiatives and the ideas to be coming from them, and to generate that kind of team building and networking across the university and beyond.
So you've mentioned a couple really interesting aspects of the project there. Can you tell me more about Bleeding Free, the documentary?
Sure. So Bleeding Free is the documentary that we produced as part of the project. At its heart, it follows the design students and the process of making the period product dispensers that were to be rolled out across Scotland in colleges, schools and universities. And at the same time, it looks at the broader picture around menstruation, the women and girls and menstruators' experiences of menstruation, of the stigma, and as well, we meet campaigners, including schoolgirls from Glasgow, who were speaking to their sort of fellow pupils at school and creating awareness around menstruation and talking about it. And we took the film to Uganda. And in Uganda, I mean, it was such a wonderful opportunity to learn and to meet with other organisations that were working around menstrual health management and education there. And of course, the film was produced by the student team. I ended up, if you like, producing it, so kind of bringing it together at the end. But the students location directed and recorded and produced all the the material that you see in the film, and yeah, we brought it together as a sort of 50-minute documentary.
Thank you. And again, coming back to some of the aspects of the project that you've mentioned, what was it like supporting and hosting the Bloody Pig brunches, and how was that in terms of having those conversations and interaction with students on campus?
Ruth?
For me, it represented a shift in the mindset of our students, and I was never really aware before that point of a lot of student activism in the student body. Designers and creative industries guys tend to come really focused on their work. It's quite a vocational university, Edinburgh, Napier. They're really focused on getting a job. And I hadn't really been aware of a massive amount of student activism before, but this just seemed to ignite the student body and the staff. And the Bloody Wig brunches were a great focal point for that. They were joyful events for a start point. We had drag queens, and we had, no alcohol, but we had alcohol-free Bloody Marys that people brought period products along and donated to pay for the brunch. We had music students giving us entertainment throughout the events, and students and staff, and particularly our male colleagues, coming along to have conversations that they were really interested to have, but never felt as if they'd had a space to have before, which was just glorious, actually. It was really lovely. I found yourself talking about periods to people that you would just never, ever have done that with before. And it's amazing how quickly the stigma falls away when there's space for those conversations. And I think that that's something that we really found in Uganda, which I wasn't expecting to find, that so many of the organisations that we met with were successfully making those spaces, but in a much more culturally appropriate way. So the drag queens and the Bloody Marys really worked in Edinburgh and resonated with us and our students and the kind of environment that they wanted to have those conversations in. But, some schools, much more conservative environments in Uganda, some of them really engaged by music. There was a lot of street theatre that were starting to create spaces for these conversations. So it made you realise how much we can learn from other cultures in terms of how amazingly well they're doing to create spaces for these conversations. And of course, it is about products and the practical aspects of what we did and what others are doing in this space. But it's so much more about those conversations and how that changes, how people think about not just menstruation, but women's health generally, and kind of the diversity and inclusion agenda that we're trying to promote across all of our organisations and across the sector.
I would agree with that. I just to say, I think that in a way, while at the beginning, if you like, of the project, there was a focus, if you like, around the products and designing products, and that, and that as well came through from the policy initiative from the government. But we instantly became aware, and through the conversations and the events and even the research that the students were doing, was that it's about this bigger picture of tackling the shame, and it's more about dignity really than it is about necessarily thinking period poverty.
I think that's a fantastic set of insights. The idea that these are conversations that need to happen, but not only that they will happen if you try.
Yeah,
I think that's a fantastic message for the sector. So what has been the impact with your staff and students at Napier, and what's the legacy of the project?
I mean, I think that there's loads of different aspects to it. Part of it has been the growth of the students that were involved. You saw that immediately. Some of the students, certainly the designers, really became different individuals. They transformed in their confidence levels. They became leaders within their peer groups. They worked out how to work with different disciplines. And within the institution, we created a way of working within the disciplines that's been replicated in other projects, other award-winning projects. That's shown us that we can do that within the structures that exist within higher education. But it's the space for the conversations. Napier's become one of these leaders in this space, which wasn't what we set out to do particularly, but now we get students and academics getting into contact with us to influence their research projects because of the success that we had had. And I think you're right, David. It's shown that you can have really difficult conversations, and it's not actually that difficult to provide a space to let them happen. And hopefully that's the legacy that both at Napier and beyond, that people see that there is space for those conversations if you just kind of take the time to make that happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the sort of interdisciplinariness, if you like, of our project, you know, bringing together, you know, students who, as we said, you know, they often are very focused on their own thing, bringing them together, again, the design and the film and television, but also this sort of working with event students or marketing or journalism students. And for me, obviously, as well, with the documentary, that's a sort of, it's an ongoing project, you know, in a different kind of way, and we're able to use the film to keep conversations going, really. And we're currently, we raised some funding, so I've got a sort of student intern at the moment supporting with setting up screenings at both further screenings actually at Napier for next term, but really more importantly as well, abroad at universities in the US and Europe, and kind of creating conversations that again that the students are leading on. Do you know, I'm really trying, I'll come in and get involved at certain points, but it's really lovely to be able to let the students get excited about this and run with it themselves.
What would your advice be for other institutions that were interested in period dignity and period poverty?
Just get involved, you know, and just play to your strengths. Like all of these things, you always try and work out what your superpower is in these situations. And education has got a massive role to play, just because we've got the freedom to be able to explore some of these spaces in a way that other people don't. You know, think about using product design, which is really where I've come from, to tackle period poverty. I couldn't have imagined that when I was in industry. How would you go about that? But education gives you the space to do that. And Kirsten and I love working together because those things complement each other. We've got a lot of the similar values, but really different expertise. And having worked with filmmakers, it makes me realise that you need filmmakers for everything that you do. You know, and then you go off and do another project with a different discipline, and you think, oh, I need this for everything that I do. And it's expanding your horizons and just having a go at it and saying this is important. It doesn't need to just be about writing a policy for your organisation, which can be really dry and difficult, and not everybody wants to get involved. That work's essential, of course it is, but it's not where everybody's superpower lies. Sometimes you can just go and throw a mad event and have so much fun with it, and go to Uganda and you just think, well, I'm not sure how all this happened, but it was genuinely student led, and there's nothing to say that you can't have fun with some of this stuff. And in some ways, that's the most effective way of generating change.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it's about bravery, and I mean, and Ruth talks a lot about creative bravery, and I think this was a kind of project was a good example of that. It shows that there's learning happens in lots of different ways, and we're particularly interested in sort of, if you like, project-based learning that has so many different aspects to it, and I think as well. But that with the right support in the right kind of ways, the students can absolutely run with it themselves. I mean, that again, I think that's the important thing. And we were able to support, for example, with office sort of space that the students were able to use to come together as a team for meetings and to make their own, and which they were able to run as a team, and things like that. And again, back to things like facilities and other staff in the university that supported and were open to what we were doing was really good to see, and is, yeah, I would encourage if other folk are going to do it, but certainly to do it.
Is there anything else that either of you would like to share or highlight about the project?
I think just to thank Times Higher. I've just been a great supporter of the work that we've been doing, and just generally of the work that Edinburgh Napier does, and it shows that kind of those sorts of alternative approaches to projects are always worth having a go at, and the awards are really important just to reassure, you know, academics and students to get the recognition that they deserve. So we just thank the organisation and say we've had a lot of fun both at the awards and, you know, just being part of this process. I think it's been hugely rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo that, and that you recognise the project and what it stood for, and it encourages the further sort of opening up of the conversation and reducing the stigma around menstruation. We really value that.